Hello, good morning, and welcome to Newsfile. This is your most authoritative news analysis platform, and here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. And this morning we are canvassing for you. We go to Guinea asking questions why the military Mama Day, military man, should listen to ECOWAS when the quote-unquote democratic Alpha Conde did not listen to ECOWAS. The Ghana Bar Association just finished its annual conference in Bogatanga. Lawyers have been slammed for not paying tax. They have been questioned for acts in misconduct, including on social media. And there's a group, lawyers and non-lawyers, protesting what they say is a GBA's loss of voice, critical voice on national issues, and that confidence in it is at the lowest ever. Of course, the country is in urgent search of a coach, but is the Black Stars' abysmal showing a matter of bad coaching? These are the questions that we canvass for you in the issues that we discuss this morning. I'm Samson Ladi Anyanini, and I will tell you briefly about my take. And I really wanted to be able to say something to the organizing team of the Ghana Bar Association in the Upper East region, in the northern part of the country, for doing such a brilliant work. They have been praised. I have not heard a single criticism of what they have been able to do in the conference. They organized a very good conference that everybody else in the association have been praising them for. Of course, they were led by Afoko Amwak, Roxin Akugre. Afoko Amwak is the president of the Upper East Region Bar, and Roxin Akugre is the secretary there. Of course, you can't forget people like Anthony Namo. They were they were there, hands on deck, and also particularly Sule Sambian, such an organizer. On the ground, you see him literally everywhere, ensuring that the right things are done. I think that is what gave us such a good organization. Of course, the national executive had a role to play. Susie, you guys did a great job. But whilst there, there was something that really excited me. And I had the privilege of being in a conversation with very senior lawyers and senior police officers the night before, on the Sunday, and we're having a conversation. We did not know at the time that the police are taking certain actions, arresting the prophet Osu Bempa and taking on the guy who was on television saying that he had committed murders, and the videos were viral. And these guys had one word, that if these people were not dealt with by the law, it will breed impunity and it will demoralize law enforcement. So I was very excited about that. So I say Ghana's constitution, which is the supreme law of the land, forbids discriminatory treatment on grounds including social standing of a person. It reinforces with with its equality before the law principle. We are all supposed to be equal before the law. Whether you are the nation's number one, whatever prophet you call yourself, you are some charlatan, always on television, doing all the bad things that nobody can criticize. The truth is, this is how we build a happy, prosperous, and enduring democratic society. If only a few privileged class of politicians, if you like, powerful, rich and influential, enjoy the benefits of this democracy, it will not survive. It will collapse. These are some of the acts that breed lawlessness and embolden people to resort to protest and use of abusive language instead of constructive criticism and inciting violence. National Security Coordinator Major General Francis Eduamanfo rightly observes that a country whose masses have lost confidence in the justice system and are not assured of fair trial is, quote, a ticking time bomb waiting to explode, unquote. He stresses that, quote, such conditions create a vulnerable population that can be manipulated to revolt against the established order and provides a veritable justification for the masses to take the law into their own hands and act in ways that threaten the security of the state. Many mothers in cells and in prisons watched us, this population, lambasting the courts for no good reason, giving Ekwapimpolo less than a quarter of the punishment the law dictates for her conduct. I don't know what your motivation this time is for taking on the court, for denying a man bail when the law allows the court to exercise such, discretion. I don't know what your motivation is for attacking the IGP, Dan Parry, for claiming that he's being motivated by whatever. What I can tell you this morning is that this IGP has started right, and all he needs is our support so that lawlessness does not gain ground and the police disempowered and disincentivized from ensuring that we are all protected. That will be my take. I will be right back for us to begin to canvass the issues we have tabled for you this morning. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. It's brought to you by Bank of Africa, MTN, Ashasi University, Robert & Sons, Waylead Properties, Star Assurance, Duroplus, DBS Industries, MG Auto Trading, and CBG. We stand with you. My guest this morning, Professor Kwesi Ening. He's Director, Faculty of Academic Affairs and Research, Kofi Annan International Peacekeeping Training Center. David Ofosu-Dotte, he is Senior Partner, AB and David Africa. He joins us particularly for the second discussion. And Frank Davis is Senior Member, the GBA, Immediate Past President, Greater Accra Bar. He was Mogabi. And Chairman, Governing Board of the DVLA, Professor Appiah-J. Itua, Kojo Appiah-J. Itua is with the School of Law, University of Ghana, has specialties and interest in gender issues and also matters concerning the continent of Africa and regional issues. Gentlemen, thank you so very much for making the time to join us on Newsfile.
Well, thank you and good morning.
Thank you. Great. In the very final segment, we'll be joined by Carl Tofor, lecturer and sports journalist, Gary Al Smith, Joy Sports, and Kojo Ade-Mensah, former columnist of the Kotoko Express and sports analyst. So I'm here in the studio with Frank Davis. I say warm welcome to you. It's been a long time we had you on Newsfile.
Thank you. Thank you, Samson.
Right.
Pleasure to be here once again.
Great. And you were missing at the bar conference. I don't remember a bar conference that I didn't see you, except this.
It was quite unfortunate. I was outside jurisdiction, but I did virtual conferences.
Great.
I was in good spirit.
Great, great. And I suppose you enjoyed it. Surprising, but for East Udanabe's desert pastures, that's, huge place. We couldn't have had the conference in Boga.
I must say, take this singular opportunity to congratulate the leadership of the bar for such a remarkable conference. I mean, kudos to my very good friend on council, Afok, and then to Namon, to Sambian, and all the guys who did that fantastic job. It was really well organized and on the back of the e-voting. I enjoyed every bit of the
That's
conference.
great.
Kudos, my friends, and I'm sorry I wasn't there. He created anxious moments.
That's okay, we understand. We understand. We got notes from you suggesting that you were missing it, and I could understand that you really missed it.
Badly.
Right. And thank you all, everyone. When I was there, I was greeted with so much love. The very first day I arrived, I got this smoke, and I came back with a bag load of smokes. And this was given to me by Lou Palte, who is the Gorogo chief at the Gorogo chief in Tongo. And he works at the Sandema Hospital, Bulsa North Municipality. Thank you all so very much. We thank the police also. They were in their great numbers and helped us. Now, let's go to talk about Africa affairs. And we have had some distinguished analysts speak about the issue briefly. Let's hear two of them before we come to our guests.
We are required to take informed decisions on these matters that will have long-term consequences for the stability and the defense of the democratic values of our region. I count on you, Excellencies, to help proffer durable solutions to the crisis. And I'm confident that, as in the past, we will rise to the occasion. I wish us fruitful deliberations, and I thank you for your attention.
The Constitution has been overthrown, according to the pushists. So they need to write a new Constitution. And it's not going to be a simple matter. I think my colleague, the political scientist, can speak to that. It's not a very simple matter of throwing away the Constitution that was re-engineered by Condé, which served as a proximate cause for his overthrow, and then restoring the former Constitution. Is going to be an entirely new process of bringing together segments of Guinean society, as they are now, telling us, to try and get some consensus around this new Constitution. 6 months is too short for them. ECOWAS has missed the plot. And I think it's not too late, as we did in the Gambia, to send a high-level team of 7 leaders or retired former heads of state to go and engage them and work out a plan, a transition plan. Yeah. So far, we know that the leaders are working out their own transition plan. They are consulting segments of Guinean society. So they are adopting the right approach to right the wrongs that Condé, effected on the state.
Right. So that's Colonel Festus Abuaje, retired, on the demands by ECOWAS on the military junta. And first you heard President Akufo-Addo, who also leads the ECOWAS, opening the emergency summit, so to speak, meeting that they had here in Accra, following which he himself has flown out to see to bringing some, sanity in the place. Let me begin with Professor Kuja Piejetua. And last week you were on the show and you literally joined the Guinean people in justifying what has happened. What do you say about what the ECOWAS leaders are demanding?
Thank you, Samson. And first of all, let me say that I admire your smoke very much. And so I hope you get one for me.
That's for sure.
So I think there have been a number of new developments within the past week or so. Some positive, some also not so positive. But I think on the whole, we see some trend towards helping to resolve the issue. And for me, one key thing is the issue of how democracy can be restored in Guinea. And we see ECOWAS trying to flex its muscles and indicating to the coup makers that they don't have a place in the democratic dispensation that ECOWAS wants Guinea to chart. And to me, that is the new thing about ECOWAS move, that they should return the country to constitutional rule in 6 months, but they should not take part in the elections, if what I read in the news was right.
And last week you referred us to the protocols or some of their own rules that they have set, which does not allow those who topple a government to be part of the new government.
That's right. Yes. So to me, that is a positive, I think, because to me, the role of the military in politics is simply to be on the side of the masses to change government, where it has become well nigh impossible to change government through the ballot box or the agreed formula in the constitution of the particular country. So if, as a result of what we saw in Guinea during the time of Condé before he was overthrown, he engineered the constitution, doctored it, and introduced a third term, which led to some serious human rights violations taking place. And he's going ahead to put in prison some politicians and so on. Clearly, it indicated that there was no other way for democratic change to occur in the country. And so, in my opinion, the military did the right thing by ensuring the overthrow of the regime. But as I indicated, the military is supposed to play an apolitical role in politics or in democracy or governance in a particular country. So they are to be on the side of the masses, and after the dictatorship is overthrown, they leave the scene and allow democracy to return. And so they should have actually made that decision themselves, or should have indicated to the people that that's what we're going to do. But I think ECOWAS having taken that decision, ECOWAS has made a progressive step, and it is hoped that the military junta will agree to that process, and the whole thing will be how, within the 6-month space, there will be no opportunity or room for corruption and maladministration, or a situation where the military regime could set up a proxy in any of the political parties that may decide to contest the elections.
The regime is already saying that, well, ECOWAS has suspended it, and they're like, we don't care anyway. We are answerable to the Guinean people who have given us overwhelming support, and they have begun a process of, if you like, rooting out corruption investigations, among others. They are not immediately thinking about a transition.
Yeah, that is where the problem is. That is where the problem is. That is why, in the first place, ECOWAS has come in late, because if at the time Condé was misbehaving and doctoring the constitution, they had been strict on him and ensured that the rules that they themselves have set in the ECOWAS protocol, supplementary protocol on democracy and governance, and the AU various documents, instruments on ensuring democracy and governance in Africa, it would have been where we are today. But as things stand, I think the military has finished their job. Any attempt for them to remain in power and to say that they are ensuring that there's corruption is ruled out and so on, it's not their job. They should prepare the ground and leave the scene. And when they have done that, then they will be applauded by the people, and it will ensure that democracy is restored in the country.
Very briefly, let me know how you think about this. Should ECOWAS or AU rather be suspending countries when their leaders refuse to listen at the time they are taking steps that are undemocratic? Like at the time when Alpha Condé, we understand that the ECOWAS leaders spoke to him privately. They brought pressure to bear, but he simply ignored them. should they rather be suspending the countries at such times and issuing the sanctions at such times rather than wait for a coup?
Well, I think that the ECOWAS move is a little bit harsh. And at this stage, we are talking about how to resolve a very difficult situation. And ECOWAS needs to ensure that its negotiation mechanisms, mediation mechanisms are triggered in such a way and applied in such a way that it will help resolve the matter. In one sense, we need to applaud the military for the step they took in ensuring that democracy is restored. But the key thing is that they are not supposed to play a part in the new democracy that is going to take place. They are just supposed to pave the way for democracy to return to power. The military does not have a place in democracy in that sense.
Okay.
So sanctions, in my opinion, were a little bit rushed because you want to make sure that you coax these people and then they will leave the scene. They still have the military might to remain in power. And if sanctions are applied, in most cases, rather the people on the ground who will be affected. So I think that it should have been a step-by-step approach to give them a little space, maybe 2 months, 3 months, give them timelines. Within 1 month, maybe people would have been released from prison. Within the next month, we think about whether a new constitution should be built right from the ground, or they just amend the constitution, take out the third-termism ones that Condé introduced and keep what it is. So these timelines, every month or so, when progress is made, then ECOWAS will say, we give you the tick, you have done well, keep going. But if they don't meet the mark for a particular time frame, then some limited sanctions will be applied. I think that is a way to go. Okay. Otherwise, these people can be tough and say that we are not negotiating anymore. Do whatever you can do. And there's not much that ECOWAS can do.
All right. Professor Kwesi Ening, how do you read what is going on in Guinea and President Akufo-Addo and his counterparts, Alassane Ouattara, and the team that is gone there?
Samson, thank you very much. Well, let me start by greeting my senior boy, Frank Davis, in the studio. I've been seeing him for ages, so it's nice to see him. He's coolly high. He hasn't changed very much. And greet Kwejo also. But let me also say this. Samson, I think you need to lead a campaign for a hashtag that says, we stand with Dampare. Bold, daring, strong, principled, and prepared to take on the powers that be. When you have pastors gallivanting in front of their congregation, preaching about the way they can bribe people within the executive, within national security, and if you know how to wash your hands, nothing. The law does not work for you.
Most of it is empty bragging. They don't do what they can't do some of the things they say. They empty bragging. You don't think?
Yes, but when you brag before gullible people, they bite.
Okay.
And when you have a law enforcement chief being able to show that the law works, and this empty braggart is nothing but an empty shell, then it sends a signal that we all need to comply, particularly when that officer himself stays in traffic.
Right.
So the hashtag I identify with Dampare is something that I accede to 100%.
I'll do that and more. I'll do that and more, particularly against people who have no morals at all, like this class of charlatans who are now, they are beginning to even rain curses on the IGP and suggesting that certain things might happen to him because he's touched, you know, like the Bible says, touch not my anointed. Anyway, thank you.
When the anointed are quack people, charlatans, gangsters who use the name of God to con and trick people, then they are the people who will be cursed and they are the people who will be brought down. Now, right. Guinea.
Yeah.
Guinea is unfortunate, but it is not altogether surprising. I agree with some of the things that my dear friend Pedro has said. But Pedro, the military will not leave. Why should they? Precisely because those who ought to have implemented and ensured that the rules that we had all voluntarily signed on to would be complied with. No single ECOWAS member state has been intimidated by its members to sign on to any of the protocols on democracy and good governance and on conflict prevention. So what I agree with Kojo on is that we need to accept that the elite consensus that has been built around shared values, shared norms, cooperative behavior does not work, first because the Commission has failed to play the role of a supranational commission capable of using multiple instruments at its disposal to bring about behavioral change. Two, that the heads of states themselves have failed to bring peer pressure to bear. And Samson, I don't buy this ex post facto argument that, oh, we engaged him. So why didn't you tell us when you were engaging him? Because right now, it's about credibility. I mean, the credibility of the whole institution is presently at stake. How does this institution that we all agree does have an important role to play, play or perform that function in a manner that brings about trust, that brings about stakeholder buy-in? Now, sanctions. What we are seeing now is actually a retrogression of what ECOWAS has been doing from 1980. If you look at ECOWAS's intervention and response mechanisms to unconstitutional changes of government, you would notice that over time, and particularly since 2000, that there has been more of a softening of ECOWAS's position. It allows the crisis to happen, and then there's always a 6 months to a 24-month transitional rule. And it doesn't seem to me very much that we are using the knowledge at our disposal to say, and here I agree with Kwejo once more, what are the incremental steps that can be taken to ensure that unconstitutional changes of government or extension of regimes do not take place? And here, I want to come back to what does it mean when we say unconstitutional change of government? ECOWAS seems to have a very narrow interpretation of what that sentence means. That unconstitutionality only comes when the military steps in. I would argue that we need to go back a couple of steps. That when the governing elite of any country, of any signatory state, changes the constitution, but prior to that, ensures that civil societies are under attack, the media is biased, opposition access to state media is reduced, Supreme Courts and are filled with supporters of the party, electoral commissions are intimidated. All those are steps in ensuring that unconstitutional takeovers do happen, either through the courts or through the barrel of the gun.
You say the military will not leave, at least not now. So the efforts that's being led by President Akufo-Addo and Alassane Ouattara, you don't think will yield anything?
Well, sanctions. I think if we look at the public reception of the ECOWAS delegation that went to Conakry, there were two things that we can learn from the videos that we have seen. One, that the people of Guinea are not in support of the sanctions regime and the timetable. 2, that there is popular Guinean support for the coup. And I would say once more, unfortunately so. Because I don't give the military regime more than 6 months to 12 months, the public support will begin to shift for a much more inclusive and governance and a return to democracy. Those guns will be turned against the public that is supporting them now. And Guinea's history is replete with these, military excesses towards the civilian populace. So the real question becomes, how can we intervene in a manner that brings about behavioral change? Sanctions themselves will not do it. Autocratic regimes are usually able to resist sanctions more effectively than democracies. And particularly Guinea's case is very instructive here, because Guinea is not a small fly-by-night country. It has more than 60% of some of the world's most critical natural resources necessary for fueling China's industrialization process. So when you do 2 things, freeze banking accounts, and I doubt if any of those new leaders have any banking accounts elsewhere in which there are a couple of hundreds of dollars. They are going to open new banking accounts.
Right.
They are going to open it, not in the West, but certainly probably in China.
Okay, let me get Frank Davis's views on this, and then David Ofosu-Dorte may help us to appreciate what the impact or consequences or implication of the ban or the suspension will be for the people, or it's actually, inconsequential, and that's why they can simply say, you can go to hell with it. Alassane Ouattara joining the president has become one issue that many have criticized. Do you support the fact that that is very problematic and that the leaders didn't think through that?
Good morning once again to your cherished listeners and viewers. This was something I wouldn't have wished to comment on, but you have got me in the box, so I'll do exactly that. It's a two-way traffic. Rather unfortunate that such an excellent president, Alassane Ouattara, has been caught in such a quagmire. Because the running commentary is that he also, in quotes, manipulated the constitution and got himself a third term in office. That is a stick which can never go. And if you weigh that against what is happening in Conakry now, Alpha Condé has also manipulated the constitution and got himself a third term, much against the protestation of the dominant opposition and other organized societies in Guinea. I honestly would wish that we give the ECOWAS, heads of states and governments, the opportunity to try to sail through this very difficult proposition, because it would seem as if the military are emboldened by the fact that they have, in quotes, justifiably overthrown a democratic president who was being undemocratic, in quotes. So they want to believe that they have the support of the Guinean people, which has manifested in the short run. Like my good friend engineer in school, Professor Kusenin, said, for how long can that support reign? To get weary, and the people who want to have a return to democratic rule. No matter the options, I think most often than not, people prefer a rule of law than rule bygone. So we'll get to that threshold. But I have very sad memories for Alassana. Otherwise, he is a very excellent president. So maybe that is where the problem is shifted. He finds himself in the very first round.
And do you think, the question I asked Professor Pierre J. Etia and which Professor Enin support, do you think that AU and the ECOWAS should rather be issuing sanctions when democratic ideals and principles are being violated in these countries or member countries, rather than wait until, you know, the whole thing is lost? Then there's a military junta and say, hey, you guys, you shouldn't belong.
I couldn't agree with you the more, Samson. But you see, we will have to look at the dynamics carefully. You are a president of your republic. Another man is the president of his republic. Now, I would have thought there is, I mean, the ECOWAS heads of states are saying that they had a very reasoned discussion with him. They pleaded with him not to do what he did. And willingly he went ahead and did what has all come to hit us now. I think that moving forward, the sanctions should be applied before any military despot decides to take the gun. This time we were fortunate; it was just a bloodless coup. It was just a simple overthrow. Leave the space and let us see what we can do. But when you get people who are stuck in their minds as to what to do, Samson, no matter the persuasion, it will be very difficult for you to get them to go. And when he thinks that he is in charge of his own country, he's the master of all his surveys, and then you are a president of another country, forget about ECOWAS. I mean, yes, he will subscribe to the principles of ECOWAS, but when he's hell-bent on doing something, you sitting in your country as president, 4 or 5 presidents are going to tell him that, look, don't do what you're doing. He might listen to you, but what extent? And if he decides to do something to the contrary,
they have signed onto, you know, a supranational, you know, organization that we want to be united and we want to use one body and have one voice. We set the rules, actually set up courts, you know, to do things. So if they are not amenable to those rules, then what is the use of ECOWAS and what's the use of AU?
Samson, I can understand where the difficulty is, but this is what the AU should be looking at critically now. This is what has confronted us. And I think very definitive steps should be taken to quell this once and for all.
Okay.
Where presidents think that because they are laws of what they survey, even though if there's a charter and you have signed on, you can decide to do whatever you want to do. I think moving forward, this is the time for ECOWAS to crack the whip. That if you don't subscribe, you don't subscribe. But if you subscribe, you should be amenable to our regime. I don't think it sits well.
Right.
And the ECOWAS heads of states, I think, are finding themselves in a very, very uncomfortable situation. Right. I wish all the best for His Excellency the President of the Republic. He is leading this fight. And we should all pray that they are able to achieve whatever they've gone to Conakry to do.
Right. Professor PJ, help us. What's the binding nature of all the protocols that they sign onto as member countries to ECOWAS? And why shouldn't they respect it? If they will not respect them, what's the point of the organization?
Well, that's a very good question to ask. First of all, the ECOWAS protocols, the AU instruments, if you talk about the AU Constitutive Act itself, it has provisions on sanctions being applied.
Right.
And so these are all binding, legally binding instruments that countries who are members of these international organizations are supposed to adhere to. Unfortunately, though, when we thought that the AU and ECOWAS would have attained a status where more respect will be given to its provisions, especially in this time and age where we're talking about democracy, in this time and age where the notion of non-indifference, for example, is a rule, or is supposed to be the rule in the AU. At least it is clearly stated in its constitutive acts that it could set up a interventionist approach to ensure that impunity does not reign, and they can quickly apply sanctions and ensure that order is prevailed. Now, what is unfortunate, though, is that, as Kwesi said, the notion or an understanding of unconstitutional change in government has been given a very narrow interpretation. It is still seen largely in the context of a coup d'etat. But as I mentioned last week, there are 5 different types of unconstitutional changes in government, which the AU itself has recognized. And the Alpha Conde one falls into the 5th category, which is where a constitution is tampered with or adopted to allow for extended stay in power, and which we generally refer to as third-termism, even though it could be indefinite. For example, if you look at Togo, I think Gabon, and so on, they now have indefinite terms for their leaders. So, which brings into question, if you go back to the Lome Declaration on Unconstitutional Changes in Governments, it spells out what should be done if an unconstitutional change in government takes place. But that definition is limited to where there is a coup d'etat, because the provision says that in case there is an unconstitutional change in government, the government that is in power, that came to power through unconstitutional means, should return the country to constitutional rule within a 6-month period. And that is what the ECOWAS leaders are trying to apply now. But what sanctions would they apply if they are going by this Lome Declaration, where there is an unconstitutional change in government, whereby we have this third-termism issue in play? Should the government decide to return the country to constitutional rule, and what kind of sanctions would apply in that case? The AU position is silent on this, and that is where it probably gives room for or emboldens those who want to doctor the constitutions and remain in power. But that the Lome Declaration itself is not the only instrument we can resort to. The AU Constitutive Act itself is clear that in case of such a situation, the Peace and Security Council is supposed to make a decision and to ensure that there could be intervention. Unfortunately, throughout the history of the AU, it has not been able to take such a step. They attempted it in Burundi, but in the end, it couldn't go ahead. So the question that you're asking is a very good question. Why is it that we belong to such organizations, but we don't want to respect its laws or provisions and protocols and so on? It is all about the fact that we have not been able to transform the international organization to have a character of its own. The international organization is supposed to take away some sovereignty from the member states. Right. And member states should be willing to cede part of their sovereignty to the international organization to enable it to have a character of its own and to be able to apply sanctions where necessary. And states are supposed to obey. With ECOWAS in particular, it is transforming itself, or it has reached a stage where it has become a supranational body, so that any decision that it makes, you don't have to say, I'm going back to my country to see if my country will be willing to apply the law or not. It takes effect immediately. And so we have reached a stage where these international organizations in Africa have moved a notch higher, but everything remains more or less on paper. So it becomes critical that we don't leave the running of these international organizations to our political leaders only. So the dream, the ideal of from the years of Pan-Africanism, Nkrumah, Secretary, Nyerere, all coming together up to the point of the setting up of the AU, now OAU, to the 1980 Lagos Treaty,
And then subsequently, almost all the regions have had their own, if you like, bodies, unions coming together for the purpose. You have the ECOWAS, you have the SADC, you have the COMESA, you have the CENSAD, all of them, the ECAS, now have gravitated and ultimately come to AFTA, which Ghana is hosting the headquarters, where as many as 44 of the 55 countries have signed onto. And the idea is that this will be the biggest move to the union that we were expecting. So if we get the economic union, we can translate that gradually into the political union. We have the 2063, is it 63 agenda?
Yes.
That they have adopted for themselves, looking for democracies in Africa, which is ideal, looking at the EU and the rest of them. You are saying this is also elusive?
It is elusive. And it is elusive because African countries still want to enjoy the benefits of colonialism in a certain way. And I say so with respect to, in two respects. First, colonialism left behind certain structures and institutions which were used to suppress the people during the colonial period and during the anti-colonial struggle. When independence came, our leaders tried to keep these laws and apply them against their own citizenry. Secondly, African leaders are reproducing part of the colonial powers which were abolished or abrogated when colonialism came into place. And so the kind of democracy that we have is, to say it bluntly, a caricatured one. And so long as the principal interest is self-interest, where security is exaggerated and imagined in order to clamp down on people. And in the end, it is not about human security, but a state-centric form of security, which in the end is about regime security. Then we don't see a situation where democracy has entrenched itself so that we can move beyond these unconstitutional changes in government and ensure that we arrive at a threshold where human security is the way to go, where we say that until people have been allowed to take part in governance, until we have tolerance for the views of the minority, until we're able to design a kind of democracy where it is not about the winner takes all kind of mentality. We are going to have these problems here and there. And so it is important that we re-examine the whole concept of democracy, because that is what feeds into the challenges we are having. When in the 90s, after the fall of the Berlin Wall, about 3/4 of African countries changed their constitutions to allow for multi-party democracy, reintroduce civil society activism, and so on. It was a new liberation that came to Africa. But the trend is changing. It's changing again, where we have illiberal democracies springing up here and there, where we have third-termism springing up here and there. And, it always gets to a point where people begins to fight back. Even after the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Arab Spring which started, so it's about 4 or 5 countries in North Africa, getting into that. Egypt, Libya, Tunisia, and so on. And a few countries in even Cameroon and others, they also tried to fight and call for change. Okay. So tension and insecurity are still there, because people always want to ensure that they are able to have the opportunity to take part in governance. So the human security approach is where we should look for. Okay. And make sure that it takes seat.
Thank you very much. So we can't end this discussion without me asking Professor Kwesi Enin. You say this is unfortunate but not surprising, and the military is not going to leave, or at least not soon. But 6 months, the order is for them to return the country's constitutional rule within 6 months. Do you think this is realistic? I'm asking a question. You seem to have preempted the answer already. If it's not realistic, how do we resolve this? Because this must be resolved.
Well, I think we can resolve this by being honest with ourselves and understanding the geopolitics around the coup itself. I mean, as I was saying prior to the break, Guinea is not some fly-by-night little country that you can order. It has 82 million tons of iron ore. That was the 2019 assessment. This is in hundreds of billions of dollars worth. It is that iron ore that drives China's industrialization game. Not only that, the Russian aluminum industry, the Priska and his people, through the company Rusal, are very active also in Guinea's economy. We now know that the Russian mercenary group, the Wagner Group, has been invited by Mali to come and provide security. Through the Rusal mining group, Wagner will eventually come to Guinea. So I agree with Kwejo very much, and then also with Frank Davis, that I think this is the time for ECOWAS's heads of states and the commission itself to bring up together the key minds in the sub-region and to say, look, how do we deal with these unconstitutional changes of power, and how can we understand the grander geopolitical, geostrategic context within which those who undermine constitutionalism feed into? Because when Condé played these games, both in the 2010 and the 2016 elections, he was playing the game between China on one hand and Israel through Mr. Steinmetz and his family on the other. So Condé's slide into unconstitutionalism, one, because he was corrupt, he liked power, and he had around him the institutional framework for corruption and for hanging on to power. But it also fed into the grander geostrategic game. And I'm wondering whether in giving Guinea 6 months, and I doubt very much if we considered this, whether we looked at the larger geostrategic game. We failed to understand that in Mali, because in Mali, the French president rather childishly said, oh, then I'm going to pull French troops out. Of course, when the two leaders had been educated in Russia, Mr. Putin is sitting in Moscow and smiling nicely because he has played the long game. And the chess bricks are beginning to fall on his side. Okay, so Russia is making a big move into Mali because France and ECOWAS miscalculated, and we seem to be miscalculating in Guinea. So Kwejo's point and Frank's point about the need to come around the table and think through what options we have, what instruments we have, elicit compliance from those who have signed on to these documents is very key. We don't have the power and the privilege of wasting time anymore. Because if you look at the videos from Mali, from Niger, from Nigeria, and from elsewhere, including Guinea, the frustration of the citizenry is bubbling to the fore. We cannot and we must not allow that to get out of control.
Okay. Thank you so very much, Professor Kwesi Enin and Professor Kwejo Appiagyei-Etua. Professor Kwesi Enin leaves us now, but Professor Appiagyei stays with us to go to the next issue about the Ghana Bar Association and matters arising from its conference on tax and indiscipline or misconduct, two accusations that it is at the lowest, confidence in the association is at the lowest in history, and that it has lost its voice as a critical civil society to help shape democracy. David Ofosu Dote also joins us for that discussion. But we take a break and return for that discussion. However, I feel sad that since 1963, we started this union game with the OAU, went through, we have done all sorts of things, and then eventually come to the after, which we are told is the boldest, attempt to realize this dream, and we still can't seem to realize it within Africa. What is wrong with us? We'll be right back.
There is a lot of individualism that has crept into both the professions and also to the democratic process itself, where people are more concerned about themselves as opposed to looking at the general welfare of the people. So
this is Newsfile, it's your most authoritative news analysis platform, and here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. It's brought to you by the kindest sponsorship of Bank of Africa, as strong as a group and close as a partner. MTN, everywhere you go. Ashesi University, educating ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa. Robert & Sons, seeing is believing. We lead, home is where one starts. Star Assurance, your solid partner. Duroplus, where Duroplus goes, water flows. DBS Industries, everything roofing in the best of quality. MG Auto Trading, official distributors of MG vehicles in Ghana. And CBG, we stand with you. Here are some of your comments, and we share with the rest of the world. Collins Little Tete says, what we are witnessing with the Guinea coup is a leadership problem across the African continent. Michael J. Jan Glovos says, what the soldiers did in Guinea is a counter coup, not a coup d'etat. Condé changing the constitution for a third term is the real coup. The soldiers had a mandate to counter Condé's coup. A.J. Nyavo John says, the vision of both AU and ECOWAS died with its founding fathers. All they have been doing is try and error. Can you imagine a bloc that is always firefighting instead of being proactive when problems are even staring at them in the face? They won't act until it escalates. Prince J. Anku says, what is Alassane Ouattara doing in Guinea? He got no business there. How can he be a mediator in a matter that he is also guilty of? Back in his country, ECOWAS got to be serious. Dr. Charles Rekubrobe says ECOWAS protocols and non-interference in internal affairs of member countries are mutually exclusive. Mutually exclusive. That's an interesting note there. Kofi Bento says that experience is pointing to the clear position that national constitutions should be subjected to sub-regional endorsement because constitutions and their amendments create coup and sub-regional stability risks. And when these coups happen, ECOWAS is called upon to spend resources and even lives to restore normalcy. All constitutions must also have perpetual clauses which allow their reinstatement after an overthrow. And the role of ECOWAS must be well scripted so it's clear to all that no one nation can destabilize the region. Then Godwin Adawine used to be on this show a lot, says ECOWAS is losing its moral authority and political legitimacy. Citizens of the sub-region, that's what they, the coup way for civilian leaders to manipulate. It's a way for civilian leaders to manipulate constitutional term limits. And when this leads to coups, then suddenly ECOWAS finds its voice. Most unfortunate. All right, so thanks for your messages. I'll read this last one from Alija Baka, Kipo Alija Baka. He says, the only cure for a grief is action. The coup wasn't as such an action, but a reaction against corruption, hardship, and power drunkenness. And the remaining ECOWAS membership should be celebrating this reminder and big lesson. It's a reminder and big lesson. Thanks for your messages. Now, let's go to the Ghana Bar Association and ask a few questions. We have had a couple of people make some comments about an aspect of the discussion we are going to have. So let's listen to them.
I'm afraid there's no easy way of putting this. You will have to start from getting members of the bar to pay their taxes. The record of lawyers in paying taxes has been historically poor. It is unfortunate, but a most unpleasant fact that members of the professions in our country have not been known to set a good example when it comes to paying taxes. They appear to think that being members of the learned professions put them above complying with everyday civic duties, like paying taxes. It is embarrassing that lawyers are often at the top of the list of those who flout our tax laws and use their expertise to avoid paying taxes.
I wish to call on all of us and the nation as a whole that we collectively re-examine our ways of life and the ways of corruption that are endemic. We need to examine bribery, which have not been normalized and accepted, through gift giving, which actively seeks to influence official conduct and to the detriment of the people who by merit deserve the opportunities snatched from them, and from the people who have no monies to compete with such endemic corrupt practices, allowing the institutions of state to work. Connected to the issue of endemic corruption in our society is the whom you know practice in our society. It has become an accepted way of life that persons of power and influence interfere in official functions of public offices and exert undue influence. Such ill conduct balloons into habit and soon into culture.
A major flaw with our tax system is a phenomenon described in popular parlance as tax evasion. It is that situation of citizens and persons working in Ghana dodging their tax obligations, either by completely avoiding coming within the tax bracket when they ought to be, or deploying illegal means to minimize their tax liability through fraudulent techniques. This practice, to say the least, it is loyal to the state. Sad to say, many lawyers are caught in the phenomenon of tax evasion as they unjustifiably avoid being caught in the tax net, either by understating their profits or concealing their true income.
There is a lot of individualism that has crept into both the professions and also to the democratic process itself, where people are more concerned about themselves as opposed to looking at the general welfare of the people.
So is that what you see at the bar, that people are
it's
using their position for personal gain?
No, I'm not saying they are using their position. What I want to say is that many lawyers are now preoccupied with how much money they can make, rather than looking at the concept of justice. You know, I spent over 20 years teaching at the law school, and my emphasis to them is to say that, look, in this whole wide world, why will God choose you to be a lawyer? There must be a purpose for it. And what is the purpose? I say you are God's instrument for justice. God has chosen you and ordained you to be an instrument or a vessel for justice. So don't talk about money, because the money is not the issue. Money is a reward, and God will reward you. Not with plenty of money, as so many of them mistakenly believe, But he'll make you make at least a living. And that's all you require. Because after all, let's put it this way. If you have plenty of money, so what?
And so you have been listening to His Excellency the President. You heard also the President of the Bar, former, call him immediate past, Anthony Forson Jr. And then you heard the Attorney General, who is the leader of the Bar, Godfrey Dame, Yeboah, and Sam Okudjeto, senior advocate. He's a member of the Council of State. And so this dominated the Bar's annual conference in Bolgatanga at the Desert Pastures, Fountain Gate Chapel Auditorium, because that was the theme for the conference, the role that lawyers can play to maximize the country's income through taxation. And the president, who spoke on the matter, said that a recent study by the World Bank estimates that the total corporate tax gap is between 9.4% and 12.6% of GDP. 9.4% and 12.6% of GDP. That's approximately 35.7 billion Ghana cedis to 47.9 billion Ghana cedis. VAT compliance gap, he said, is 39.3% of total VAT revenue. Import duty tax gap, he said, is of 32.5% of import revenue. And listen to this, potential tax revenues from sole proprietors who usually operate in the informal sector amounted to 12.6%. 12.6% of GDP. Now the very last point. He says our potential tax base has been widened from 5 million to 15 million people, because of the Ghana card, which has been converted into tin numbers. That's it. Potential tax base is now from 5 million people to 15 million people. An initial assessment of the data has, listen to this one, uncovered over 60,000 professionals, 60,000 professionals and high net worth individuals, not some common individuals, so high net worth individuals, unregistered for tax. Regrettably, several members of our esteemed legal profession fall within this bracket and will soon be receiving friendly phone calls from the tax authority. And he concluded by saying, I sincerely hope that those involved would move swiftly to regularize their tax affairs before the GRA needs to crack the whip. We need to build a culture of voluntary compliance. David, thank you very much for making the time to join us.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's hear you. What do you say? This is very sad commentary, particularly on your esteemed profession of very wealthy people.
I don't know about very wealthy, but the commentary is sad.
Well, I've been taught to know that once you're a lawyer, if you are not lazy, you will live a comfortable life, reasonably.
Generally, yes. But the commentary is sad, actually. But my sadness, quote and unquote, about the commentary is not because of the number of lawyers who allegedly or reportedly are not paying taxes. It's because I think that we are failing to understand what causes that. The problem is with the system and not with the lawyers. And give me the chance to explain what I mean. If we narrow the discussion to the fact that lawyers are getting outside the tax bracket, we are addressing the symptoms instead of the cause. Now, if you have a system where a large part of the society is generally informal, you get this, and you already gave the statistic about 12% of the gap coming from the informal sector. Let's look at how the legal profession or how practicing lawyers are set up in the first place. And this is one of the few countries in the world which are still sticking to the old tradition. Law firms here are set up mainly as partnership or as sole proprietors. If you moved the compass and you pointed to quote and unquote advanced countries, you find out that law firms are set up mainly as limited liability partnerships or as companies. Now, there are law firms in Ghana which are companies. My firm is one. Incidentally, the immediate past president of the BAS firm is one. It's very easy to go after law firms which are companies. So they do come after us, and we pay taxes. And this may surprise you to know, before we pay our tax, we are actually a large taxpayer. My firm belongs to the large taxpayers unit. Now, the way the system is organized is such that it goes after those of us in the formal sector and just keep taxing and taxing and taxing the formal sector and leaving those in the informal sector. And it's not just about lawyers. Recently, there was an announcement about having won an award, and a cousin of mine at GRA called me and said, "Oh, the taxman will be in the office." And I said, "They're already there." The moment you are seen to be doing well, they come after you and they audit you every year. So you are stretched. Once those who are informal and unknown are quote and unquote avoiding the system, and that's basic. Now, if you have a situation where law firms are set up largely as partnerships, the personal tax liability rests on the individual, and therefore they are not necessarily like in a corporate structure where the PAYE of the corporate entity itself tracks you to the individual. So we've had this for a very long time. The other reason about the system which really surprises me is that since 2016, we've had Act 915, which introduced the TIN number. What is so difficult about enforcing the TIN? If a lawyer has a bank account or is practicing, he necessarily must have a bank account. And if he has a bank account, he must necessarily have a TIN number. If the system is not enforcing it, then that becomes a problem. I think the other leg is that because lawyers, by their training, generally understand tax law, they are better equipped to avoid. And the situation is not necessarily one of evasion. There is one of avoidance also, and we need to look at that. If we put all these factors together,
and you need to state, you need to state immediately and explain what you mean by avoidance.
Well, avoiding tax is simply when you understand how the tax systems work, and therefore you are able to pay less than we ordinarily pay.
Which is lawful.
Yes, it's lawful. It's very lawful. Whilst evasion is simply avoiding or failing to pay the tax altogether.
Right.
If you put all these together, we have one category. Then there is a very big mistake on the part of the entire system. We seem to think that the lawyer's contribution to revenue of the nation is only as a result of his or her ability to pay tax. That is wrong. And as the discussion goes on, if you give me the chance, so I will elaborate a few. But I can point at least two situations where the nation itself indirectly finds a way of exporting the tax. You'll be surprised that there are corporate entities operating in Ghana, foreign corporate entities, who dispute outside the jurisdiction, and the dispute is over tax. And the only reason a Ghanaian lawyer comes into it is when they realize that they need an expert opinion on Ghanaian tax. Why should that dispute be settled outside the jurisdiction in the first place? The system is porous, and it allows a lot of people to escape the system. So I would rather we broaden the discussion away from how lawyers are avoiding tax to how we can ensure that the legal profession as a whole can contribute to the increase in revenue generation. And there are several examples we can discuss if you allow me.
Right. So you say that the issue is not exactly about the lawyer not paying tax or professionals not paying tax.
It is one of them, but we should not limit it to that.
But the system itself. Now, Godfrey Dame, the Attorney General, who also spoke about the issue and felt it was quite an indictment on the professionals, had some solutions. He said a lawyer must show evidence of tax before your license will be renewed. Every year we renew our license. He said this is one of the effective ways to ensure that everyone is paying tax. But he admits, and I read what he said, I must admit that the failure of lawyers in Ghana to discharge their full tax obligation is not entirely their fault. The absence of effective systems by the Ghana Revenue Authority to ensure that all potential taxpayers are brought into the tax net is majorly responsible. The GRA ought to devise the appropriate mechanisms for ensuring that the tax net is broadened to its elastic limit in order to bring within it all potential taxpayers, including all practicing lawyers. What do you say?
I agree 100% with the Attorney General. And I'll go further to look at what areas that it is that lawyers can contribute to increasing the revenue generation. One, of course, is the fact that lawyers must pay tax, and that I blame the regulator. I mean, we do pay tax. Indeed, you'll be surprised that we've had a situation where the GRA actually wrote to certain law firms in Ghana, thanking them for ensuring that not only are they paying taxes, but that their clients are also paying taxes. So there are exceptions, I mean, outliers, and we must admit it. So that's one. The second thing that we overlook is that lawyers are a key influence in policy formulation. And when you involve lawyers in policy formulation, they point out to you the loopholes in the system, which will enable you improve the closing the gaps in the tax bracket. And if you look at not only the recommendation that Attorney General made, but also the speech of Dr. Ali Nachia, he made a lot of useful suggestions as to how we can help increase revenue. That's one. The other one is the fact that lawyers are involved in numerous commercial transactions. Because many people in the society limit their knowledge of lawyers' work to that of litigation, and I will talk about litigation shortly, we tend to overlook that the real money that lawyers can help bring to the state is actually outside the court. And let me illustrate. Stamp duty is a major source of revenue to the government. And every agreement that requires a stamp duty is done by a lawyer in one form or the other. And because you have situations where lawyers are not encouraged to, quote and unquote, encourage their clients to pay stamp duty, you have a situation where there is a large amount of seepage in that system. So we have to look at how lawyers can help generate more revenue. And an example is stamp duty. The other one is general commercial transactions, drawing the attentions of their clients to the need to actually take the tax component into account. And then you have resolving disputes. And because we have the inability to let lawyers contribute to tax policy, evolving tax policy, there are loopholes. I'll give you an example. We do have a law, I don't remember the name of the act in Ghana, it relates to the TIN, where access, for example, to court processes can be denied if you don't display a TIN. Why will anybody pass that law? But that's what the law says. Why will I rather not allow everybody to have access to justice, and rather make sure that the payment of any compensation resulting from justice is done through the court system? And therefore, before the payment is made, the tax or the TIN number should be displayed. That way, the government gets its taxes. So if you turn the policy upside down, you realize that you attract a larger amount of tax coming as a result of the work of lawyers. Then you have debt payments, which are created very often, and as a result, you have, as it were, the little taxes that we have collected also moving away from the system because we allow this huge amount of judgment debts that we all talk about. And when we talk about collecting taxes, we should also look at how that money is spent. And I think these are areas that we need to. And lastly, Samson, the legal profession has, quote and unquote, not been considered in this country as a segment of the profession that is an identified segment to contribute to the economy. It is identified more for human rights, criticizing politicians, fighting against the dictatorial regime, etc. But if I take UK's economic outlook, the legal profession is identified clearly in the economic outlook as contributing to 5% of UK's GDP. That amounts to about £50 billion per annum.
Okay.
If I ask you how much lawyers contribute to the Ghana's GDP, nobody can tell me. It is because we overlook the multiplier effect of the profession. And that's the reason why I'm saying that. Let us broaden the discussion. First, let's tackle the fact that lawyers must pay taxes. That I agree.
Okay.
But let us broaden the discussion as to how else we can contribute to ensure that the government gets more revenue.
Okay. Frank Davis, what do you have to say about this? And from a very long time, I have had the opportunity, and because of the privilege of where I sit, to speak to, our those who lead us in the tax process. Emmanuel Kofinti is a good friend of mine. And anytime I sat in his office, the discussion had to go to how do we work on getting lawyers to pay their taxes? It's been such a worry. You continue to preach that we should keep to our core duties. A lawyer has a fourfold duty: a duty to the client, duty to the court, duty to the profession, and duty to the public. What are we doing to have such a bad name?
Thank you, Samson. This matter has rightfully come up when it has to, when the President of the Republic himself has, also a trained lawyer, has taken this charge on lawyers. Ofosu has given a rather broad view and outline of what the issues are, but I want to narrow to the specifics and take the issues one after the other. Well, I can understand why this matter has come up from you, because you are also a trained lawyer, and this was an issue just topical at the bar conference. Now, listening clearly to the President, I think he made a very instructive statement. And what he said clearly was that the survey had disclosed that about 60,000 high net worth professionals were caught in the bracket of not fully complying with their tax obligations. And it involved the creme de la creme in the Ghanaian society. And he named them: lawyers, doctors, architects, accountants, surveyors, management consultants. So it is not only the lawyers per se who are avoiding or evading taxes. It's a broad spectrum of professionals who are involved in this exercise. So my point will be that how do we tackle this issue holistically and not narrow down to lawyers alone? Because we are not the only ones who have been found wanting. Now, Ofosu gave the broad outline. There are so many categories of lawyers who are practicing. We have companies which are unlimited. We have limited liability companies. We have partnerships. And we have lawyers who practice without any known regularized structure. You know what I'm talking about. So the emphasis, I believe, should rather be laid at the doorstep of the GRA. They are the governing authority. They are the ones to make sure that people stick to their civil duties and responsibilities to pay taxes. I cannot understand why the GRA should not be able to track down the number of law firms which are operating in the country and going after the lawyers in those offices to pay taxes.
It's easy to get the list, isn't it?
Very, very easy. This time when everything, of course, through the good works of His Excellency the Vice President, almost everything in this country is being digitized. Now, if we have law firms and the GRA can go after the law firms, there is no way any lawyer, and there is no lawyer in this country who is not earning any money. I find it very difficult to say I'm paying my lawyers salaries, but lawyers earn money. We earn a lot of money. So if the GRA is acting actively and tracking down the law firms, this issue will be abated. Because, I mean, the payment of taxes is a civic responsibility. So the GRA should be able to work on this and make sure that The firms which are registered can easily, we can go to the company office and get the list. Of course, the Bar Association has a list of laws.
That's right.
And law firms. So it's not a huge miracle. It's something that can be done. Now
the solution suggested by the Attorney General.
Yes, the Attorney General. I don't agree fully with what my good friend Godfrey said. I mean, because there has to be legislation to that effect. There is no law now which says that the practicing license of a lawyer can only be renewed if he or she has not paid his taxes. So if that is the advice being preferred by the Attorney General, he's a leader of the bar, he knows what to do. But you cannot tie the paying of taxes to the renewal of a lawyer's license. There is no legislation to that effect. So if that's the way we want to go, we should effect the necessary legislation and make sure that this is complied with, because the only way a lawyer has his license renewed is when he's a law of good standing and he belongs to the profession. His license automatically will be renewed. So that is the way I will look at it. And I don't think we should be condemned too much. Like Ofosu said, some of us are paying taxes to our teeth. Yeah. Some of us are paying taxes. I mean, both in the realm of our legal profession and as public servants. Of course, I hold another portfolio as a public servant, so we pay taxes whichever way. So I think it should be narrowed down to what the GRA is doing. And I know it used to be the case at first, but now most I can say most lawyers are paying taxes, because we have moved from the regime where a law firm was made up of only 2-3 lawyers, and then they work, everybody gets money, puts it in his pocket, and then we are all practicing and living up to standards. Because even if you don't keep up those standards, the propensity for you to attract international clientele, I mean, is limited. So I think we should not be condemned too much. We are doing what best we can do, and if there's a system which can make us more regular in the payment of taxes, why not? I mean, we'll all agree to that.
Professor PJ, what's your take on this? Godfrey Dami said, look, a corrupt group of lawyers will breed whatever corrupt, even if it's judges. That's how we all come from. So if you have a client who is coming to you and, they want you to help them, as it were, escape their tax liability, rather, don't work for them.
Thank you. I think all has been said by the previous speakers, and I agree with their views that generally the responsibility is not with the lawyers. And again, most lawyers do pay taxes, or I agree that they do pay taxes, because the way the system is set up now, there are a number of ways where you cannot just escape. And I think lawyers are also responsible citizens of the country. And so that is the case in most cases. But I think we need to look at the GRA's mechanisms to ensure that they expand the tax nets. So all that I'll add to it is that we have been educated, we have benefited from the country's resources, we have been able to get some work to do as lawyers, we have acquired a profession and some resources, and therefore the duty is on us to share, pay back to the state. But it is up to the institutions that are supposed to collect the taxes to do their job, and that shouldn't be too difficult for them to do. And I think there's also that responsibility on lawyers to ensure that we obey the law and also help others to obey the law. So if we have a client who wants to evade tax, it is a criminal act, and so we shouldn't do that. But if it is tax avoidance, that one is not an illegal act. So I think that is where the GRA also has to come in to make sure that if there are some loopholes that need to be closed, it will come by way of proposing legislation so that those loopholes can be closed. But if it is about avoidance and a lawyer advises the client to do that, so long as he's not breaching the law, then I don't think there's much of a problem there. But the problem is with GRA that needs to plug those loopholes.
The GRA says it is introducing a name and shame initiative. It's introducing a name and shame initiative. In the meantime, it is confirming that, I quote, that the temptation to think that many of them, that's professionals, are not paying is there. I must admit that there are a lot of them that are not paying. Following the president's admonition, most of them have started calling us. What do you say?
Well, if they started calling, it's a good idea, but I don't know if most of them have started calling because, other colleagues have already said, a lot of lawyers, I believe, do pay their taxes. Some through their private practice, some of us also as public servants, we do pay taxes. Yes. So I didn't catch the first part of the point you said.
It says they are going to introduce name and shame.
Yes. The name and shame thing, I don't think that is the way to go, because if you don't pay your taxes, it's a criminal act. So just naming and shaming wouldn't be enough. Okay. If you just shame, it's just a moral application of the law, and we should let the law bite.
Do you get that sense where some say the law is for the rich and not for the poor, and rather against the poor? When it's about professionals, lawyers, they seem to be treating those who are violating with kid gloves. But when it's the ordinary person who set up some business trying to make a living, eke out a living, we go shut their shops and we do all the things that almost cripple their business entirely.
Certainly, the law has always favored the rich, and it has always favored the highly placed. So that one is not in dispute. And I'm sure in some respects we can say that it will also apply to how the law deals with lawyers and paying of taxes. But at the end of the day, the point is that sometimes it is how these institutions deal with the lawyers. It's not because the lawyers are not ready to pay the taxes or they cannot be compelled to pay the taxes.
On this table, all of you are saying that they should stop complaining and do what they have to do. Meanwhile, they don't complain to the ordinary, person who needs to pay tax. They crack the whip. Yes, David. Yes, David.
Crack the whip to us lawyers as well.
Yes, David.
Yeah, I think the situation is not being put well. They do crack the whip, like Prof is saying, against lawyers as well. Again, let me emphasize, the problem is with GRA, and some of us are prepared to debate GRA any day. I'll give you an example. Ask any lawyer who has ever represented a client against GRA. I mean, we were involved in a case, as an example, where GRA had done what is called a commissioner's ruling for a client, where the commissioner had already determined that the matter should be charged as a commission. And the commissioner was changing his stance and applying the tax against the client. And we said the GRA couldn't do that. And we filed a written cause against the GRA. Within a week, even though we were paying tax and we had a tax clearance certificate, the GRA wrote to every single partner in the firm to have each partner update his tax, the personal tax. They only go after people who either confront them, and ordinarily you would think I'm a privileged person. They do come after all of us. I have 3 GRA officials in my office now. They come every year, ask other former sector law firms. So the issue is being overstated. It is not that, it's just because lawyers perhaps have the skill to minimize their tax. The GRA should rather broaden the whole arrangement. There are a large number of lawyers in the informal sector, and they don't go after them. It is those who are paying the tax that they keep taxing more and more. That is the point.
So some of my viewers are asking that we are talking about all of this and we are not paying attention to the questions of accountability. What is the tax used for? Is that perhaps not one of the reasons people generally are reluctant to pay tax? The president said our tax to GDP is 14.3%. compares adversely to our peers. Sub-Saharan Africa average of 18% and 34% for OECD countries.
I mean, that's true. In any event, if you look at Ghana and the way the economy is structured, we rather should actually be doing better than the average. But we are doing, worse than the average. Okay. And I also agree with the comments about how the taxes are used. But to have the moral authority to criticize how the taxes are used, you must be paying your tax in the first place. So I think it is important that we do heed the call to pay the taxes. And then as a profession, we should stop focusing too much on politics and also talk about things like taxes and the economy and commercial issues, because those are, at the end of the day, what makes all of us thrive. So these are legitimate issues we must be discussing. Yeah. Okay.
But we need to move to the next issue so that time doesn't swallow the question of tax. You want to say something before? I think what is important also is to note that the president said we have a duty. I had mentioned the duties of the lawyer, including one to the public. And he said we should be we are in a unique role to provide advisory services to our clients against corrupt practices designed to facilitate illicit financial flows of funds and tax evasion, and also that we can enhance and take an active role in literacy in taxation so that our populace will become aware of their duties to the state. Article 41, is very clear that one of our duties is to pay our taxes as we work conscientiously. Now, the other side of the issues that came up was about issues of indiscipline, misconduct, running to social media. These days, people issue rates, and the next minute the rate is on social media. But the most critical part, which we should touch on before we move on to sports, has to do with the open letter or statement issued by a group of lawyers, quite a number of them. Some of them are members of the association, some of them are not members of the association. I tried to check lawyers in good standing, and I saw some of the names, they are not there. Some of them are not with the association at all. But they raise issues. They say that the confidence in the GBA is at its lowest, all-time lowest. And the reputation of the GBA as a vanguard of truth, justice, and accountability has lost its shine. They say the GBA has to rediscover itself and navigate a clean break from the association's recent history. It has to rediscover its voice and its role as a moral conscience of our democracy. They say a number of things, that there's growing frustration with what they perceive to be a growing disengagement and inaction by the Ghana Bar Association in several situations of clear democratic irregularity and injustice. That the reputation of the GBA as the moral conscience of our democracy and a voice for justice many decades is lost. Its long history of advocacy for the cause of right and for justice made the association a beacon of hope to many Ghanaians. So let's get to that issue. And let me begin with Professor Kojo Appiagyei, because I see that the signatories, you are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You are the 5th person to have signed this statement. What exactly is the problem? Wow, this is interesting, because I recall signing a petition some time back, but it didn't encompass all the issues that have been raised. So I must say that I didn't know I'm one of those that signed this petition that is before you, but I recall there was something circulated which
I signed, but it looks like there's a number of issues have been added to the concerns raised. But if you ask my opinion, personally, I would say that the issues raised are a bit exaggerated, but there are still concerns about what the Ghana Bar Association could do. I think that the Ghana Bar Association has a history of being very active and being supportive of issues that relate to human rights, democracy, the rule of law in the country. And so if you go back to that history, especially in the 70s or so, when civil society activism was more or less an aberration to government and was not in place, the Ghana Bar Association found a place in its committees, especially, for example, the Human Rights Committee and so on, to be active. And that was the case in a number of other African countries where the bar associations were able to confront governments about human rights violations and rule of law issues and so on, a call for democracy. And so playing back into when Ghana, the fall of the Berlin Wall, and there were attempts to reintroduce democracy in Ghana, the GBA also played an active role in that. And we also have a situation where in a number of cases, the GBA has risen up, go to court and confront issues where, for example, the Chief Justice, there are concerns about the Chief Justice, for example, in the Urban case and so on. So the GBA has done a lot of work in that respect. But I recall during the days of President Kufuor, we saw a situation where the GBA began to be less active and be less ready to criticize the Kufuor regime on the basis that they thought democracy is now working fine and there was no need to rock the boat if there was nothing to talk about. And that is where I think there may be a situation like this creeping now into the GBA, that there is a need for the GBA to sit up and do more. Certainly, there's a lot we can do. And I don't think that is only the GBA. In some respects, there's some sort of co-optation. Even if you look at UTAC, which is my own association at the University of Ghana, the universities in Ghana, there have also been calls that we need to be more active. It's not only when issues concern us that we need to sit up and talk about. We can talk about the churches, the Christian Council of Ghana, the Catholic Bishops' Conference. They were all very active in the past. And we still have a number of issues that the government needs to be pushed to do the right thing. Issues about corruption, issues about rule of law, and so on. So I think that is where GBA should sit up and say that we can identify certain problems that on a regular basis we can talk about, and we can set up committees and involve individuals to talk about issues that will ensure that we put the governments on its toes. I think that is where the problem is, and we certainly need to do more. And if we do that, I think that perception which exists will be raised. But I wouldn't say that GBA has been very dull and not doing anything at all.
I see. What do you say, Frank Davis? That's about almost 100 people putting their signature to this statement and accusing the GBA of having lost its critical voice as a vanguard of the society.
Yeah, before I answer that, before I speak to that, let me have my last take on this tax issues. I will urge those who question and advocate what our taxes are used for to also contribute their quota to national development. Most often than not, you realize that those who make all these loud noises hardly pay any taxes at all. So you should all join in nation and country building. Now, Samson, you just commented that most of the members, you look through the list of lawyers in good standing, and most of the lawyers who sign on to this petition, regrettably, are not lawyers in good standing. Is that right?
Some of them, yes.
Yeah, I find that a bit worrying. But let's discuss.
Some of them are actually not with the association at all.
So, but let's discuss the issues as they have come. I don't know where this live protestation is coming from, that we have lost our shine, we should rediscover ourselves to be the voice and vanguard. We have lost accountability of our issues, lost our voice. But you see, let us discuss this issue from the backdrop. You see, we have moved away from militarism and autocratic military despots and governments. And people should understand that we are now in the culture of democratic constitutional rule. We are in the era of the rule of law. So most of the issues which confront us get settled in the law courts. And whilst matters are pending in the law courts, lawyers are not allowed to comment or to run commentaries on matters which are sub judice. Now, in the past, because there was tyrannical rule, the Ghana Bar Association was seen as the vanguard and voice of the nation, because most of the other professional associations, with the greatest of respect, were not known to be voices which stood up against dictatorship. I can recall that it was the GBA and then the trade union congresses and other self-styled individuals who took the mantle against the government. So at that time, the GBA was found as the lone voice, propagating against ill will in society and fighting military dictatorship. So, because of the move away from military despots and autocratic rule to democratic governance, people think that the GBA has lost its voice. But I sharply disagree. And I want those who are pushing that line to give instances where they think that GBA is not complaining about matters which are ongoing and which affect the fabric of society. Let me give a classical example. Quite recently, this Kaka debacle, which resulted in this committee being formed to look into the killings and disturbances in Nigeria. When a committee is set up to investigate matters, and the work of the committee is ongoing, what will people expect the GBA to do? I ask. That the GBA should leap over itself and be commenting on matters which are before an investigative body. But even that, the GBA issued a statement. The GBA issued a statement that they will think that the investigations will be conducted in accordance with the dictates of the terms of reference of the committee, and that the committee will come out with a full-scale investigation, deliver their report to the governing authority, and then we see the way forward. Of course, the committee has finished its work. It has delivered its report to the appointing authority, and we are all waiting for the recommendations and whatever report will come out of it. Now, in the not too distant past, there was this issue which had to do with this 3 panelist journalists who were on a radio program and actually round down the judiciary and
the Munche 3 matter.
The Munche 3 matter. They got cited for contempt, and we know what happened. At the end of the day, they got a pardon from His Excellency the President at that time. The GBA found that situation a bit uncomfortable. That, of course, if the judiciary has been run down in such a manner, to the extent that some of them, I don't want to repeat the kind of language which was used, and the highest court of the land has been scandalized in such a manner. And GBA issues a statement that, of course, it is in the purview of His Excellency the President to exercise a pardon, but such exercise of pardon should be done with the utmost discretion and circumspection, gouging the mood of the society and country at that time.
Okay.
And when the GBA issued that statement, Samson, you are in this country with me. You realize the kind of vilification, the insults that was visited on the GBA. So if in one breath, people are saying that the GBA has lost its voice, and in another breath, the GBA is condemnable of actions which are taken, and the GBA is lambasted, and we, the lawyers, do not rise up to support what the GBA is doing, can anybody complain?
Okay, Mr. Fusudote will have a final say on this. Unfortunately, time is run out on us. But there are people who will say, like Frank Davis just illustrated, presently there is a member of parliament, sitting member of parliament, who also took judges to the cleaners, sat on television and insulted judges, berated them. And the GBA has not been heard about it. So people refer to that as well. What do you say? Are you still what you used to be?
I think there are two ways we should look at this. First is the question of who is responsible for reacting to what generally you would say affects the legal profession. And I think because of the GBA's quote and unquote popularity, people often confuse the GBA with the General Legal Counsel. There are some matters regarding, for example, commentary on social media, etc., that the GBA may take a stand and other lawyers may have a different stand on it. I think it is for the regulator to come in and set the rules. On social media in particular, the last time the General Legal Counsel issued rules, to the best of my knowledge, was the 2012 guidelines on Facebook and other social media. And then the recent LI 2354, which has a section on that. But as society grows, you find that we always have to constantly respond. And I'll take us a bit back to history. In 1999, my friend Frank Davis will recall, one of the decisions, or one of the discussions at the Greater Accra Bar, at that time, I think Ayuko was the president of the Greater Accra Bar, had to do with whether lawyers, for example, should be allowed to have websites. And you find that at that time it was a relevant issue. Now it is no more an issue. What is an issue is how do we guide lawyers using social media? That's one aspect. So I want to push that to the regulator. The second aspect is the bar itself. And I agree with almost everything Frank Davis has said about the fact that the bar used to be, and those were the 70s responding to Kutu Achampong and things like that. From 1992 to now, the bar finds itself in a new position. And I will recall particularly the statement made by the president of the bar, I think in the early 2000s, Mr. Kwame Tete, who actually said that the bar was now going to refrain from commenting on political issues because we had a constitutional democracy, etc. Unfortunately, there have been occasions where the bar had, as it were, made commentary on political issues. So then you have this criticism, etc., etc. Having said that, my take on the matter is very simple. Every organization, and the GBA is one, must constantly remain relevant. And to remain relevant, the organization must check itself as to how it remains relevant at a particular moment in time. At this moment in time in a constitutional democracy, our relevance is first to our members. And the membership structure itself has changed significantly. It has changed significantly from almost an entirely litigation-based structure to a fair bit of non-litigation-based lawyers. And you will find that a number of people who are not in the litigation group tend to be the ones who sign those kind of statements. I can bet that will be a very large category of them. So the relevance to its members itself is beginning to have challenges. Second has to do with relevance to its clients. And we have a large client base who perhaps may belong to one side of a very polarized society and may think, why is the bar not commenting on this and why is the bar not commenting on that? The GBA needs to take a position as to what do I do in this context? And the last one has to do with relevance to the wider society. The GBA needs to be able to specify what are the areas that I comment on and what are the areas I don't comment on. Samson, I'll conclude on this point.
All right, thank you.
Myself, Justice Minka Premo and I think Frank Davis, former president of the bar, were considered as a task force to develop a strategic plan for the bar, which we did. Now, that strategic plan has largely not been implemented to the best of my knowledge. You will find in that strategic plan, there is a lot of restructuring to be done. If we do that, our relevance will become more relevant, for want of a better word, to the modern times and these accusations. Even though I'm not entirely in agreement with accusations, but accusations are likely to become less if we become more relevant. That's the way I'll put it.
Thank you so very much, gentlemen. Unfortunately, this is all we can have for this segment, and bring in the sports guys to tell us about our search for a coach. Well, Frank Davis would have been qualified to give us some insight into this, but I think he may not want to. Thank you so very much, Mr. Frank Davis.
I'll be conflicted.
Okay, all right. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Samson, for having me.
Thank you.
You're right. There's a lawyer, Professor Kwejo Apieje. Thank you so very much. So thank you all, guys. Professor Kwejo Apieje, Chair, School of Law, University of Ghana. Frank Davis, Senior Member, Ghana Bar Association, immediate past President, Accra, Greater Accra Bar Association, and Chairman, Governing Board of the DVLA. David Ofosudote, a Senior Partner, AB and David Africa. Of course, earlier we spoke to Professor Kwesi Enim. Thank you all so very much. We will take a quick break and return to ask the question, is the coach to blame for the Black Stars' poor showing?
Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. It's your most authoritative news analysis platform. And here on Newsfile, we put Ghana first. I'll skip your text messages on the second issue that we discussed. If there is time, we'll read them to the rest of the world. And joining us now, the legendary Carl Tofor, lecturer and sports journalist. And also here in the studio, Kwejo Ademensa, he's former columnist, Kotoko Express, and sports analyst. Joining us virtually is Gary Al Smith of the Joy Sports. Gentlemen, thank you so much for making the time. And first of all, my sincere apologies for eating into the hour that we needed to have you. It is a very important discussion for the country. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
Right. So let's begin this way. Where's Gary? Hello, Gary.
Okay. Good morning.
Great.
Mr. Carl.
Great.
Good morning to you, Mr. Kwejo Ademensa. Hi.
Morning. Great.
Good morning.
So Gary, start for us. Why are we where we are now? We are in urgent search for a coach, and is that really the problem?
I think you want me to just lay the bare facts so that we go into the meat of the matter. So we are where we are because the Ghana Football Association, put out a statement a couple of days ago saying that they are dispensed with the services of Coach C.K. Akono as coach of the Black Stars. Tellingly, the statement did not give any official reason why they were doing so. And so I'm sure that is up for debate, and I'm sure we are going to touch on that as well.
You certainly know the reason. What are the reasons?
As far as I'm concerned, they will let go of a coach because they are not satisfied with his performance. However, I mentioned that the FA did not give an official statement because, Samson, I believe that it is important for us going forward so that if any coach right now, anywhere in the world, thought, I want to apply for the job of Black Stars coach, and let's say, I want to apply and I will not charge anything, I want to do it for free. He needs to know that if he goes down whatever it is that the GFA think was the tangent C.K. Akono went on, that they didn't like, he knows to not go on that tangent. If they announce a coach, as we expect them to do, very shortly, they would also be doing that coach a favor, because then it will be quite clear to us, the stakeholders, journalists, fans, everybody else, that this is what CK Akono did. And that is why he was sacked, if you get my meaning. So to answer your question briskly and concisely, because we don't have time, this is why we are where we are at the moment.
Could you?
Yeah.
The state that the Black Stars is in, is CK responsible for it?
No, I wouldn't say so. I would say it's a lack of planning. I will put it to after Ben Kofi's development plan expired, we didn't put measures in place to put back a similar plan. I mean, we could even go and copy and paste Ben Kofi's plan again. That was, his plan started out, if I recall, in 2006, 2001, 5-year development plan, 2001 to 2006. That plan is what we built on to qualify us for the World Cup, AFCON, get to the AFCON final, 2010 World Cup, and then it started tapering off. The effect of it started tapering off. By 2008, we should have had another plan in place that we would follow strictly. We didn't do that, and we are where we are. What do we do now? We look for boys who are in the diaspora, we bring them together, put them together, 3 days, 4 days, we expect them to deliver. No, it can't happen.
So typical Frefre Kobo thing.
It is a Frefre Kobo because we have players who meet their colleagues, your teammates, for the first time at the Black Star camp. How is that possible? But we all, with nostalgia, mention the Appiahs, the Asians, Suleiman Tari, Pencil, you know, Olele. We mention them with nostalgia. But these guys started playing way back in their youth. They were not meeting each other for the first time at the Black Star camp. So let's not, I mean, the coaches are very easy prey. They are the soft targets. We can always blame the coach and get away with it. But let's be frank with ourselves. We haven't planned.
But it's possible to say that the last recent performances show that CK is not up to the task.
Not necessarily. What are we saying? Look, the performance has not been good. Agreed. But what are the results? We have qualified for AFCON, right? We have qualified for AFCON. Come to the World Cup qualifiers. How many games have we played? 2. Won 1, lost 1 away to South Africa. South Africa is not such a useless team either. It's not a disaster. So, I mean, it's always easy to blame the coach. But
let's take it from here. Are you proud of the first game we claim we won? How did we win it? That's what I mean.
It was a fluke, wasn't it? I mean, if the roles had been reversed and that had been the Ghanaian goalkeeper who had allowed that shot in from, 35, 40 yards, the poor guy would have been crucified by now, no doubt. Having said that, I've heard Kojo and I've heard Gary, and you asked Gary a question, he still didn't answer it because we don't know. He's saying that if a new coach comes in, will he be satisfied with what Charles faced and then was let out? You see, the truth of the matter is this. We all know that there is some level of, in quotation marks, please, interference in the selection of players for the national team. Because it's on record, ironically from your radio station, that the FA president used certain words, that the times when coaches were solely responsible, it's gone. However, that is for the squad. In picking the team, it's the coach's prerogative. And for me, I always state that if the coach is always ready to accept the praise when the team wins and does well, then I think the coach must also carry the can when it goes badly.
I agree.
But it's not a case of just dismissing the coach without looking at the other extenuating circumstances. One, and the key and most important one, are your players up to the task? In my estimation, the answer is no. Because you're now picking players who are playing in either the second or third divisions in Europe. What about the chap who's playing here consistently and regularly? That becomes a bit of a chore. Now, if somebody is not playing regularly in Europe, and even if he's in the elite league and is sitting on the bench, does that warrant him or she? I can understand 1 or 2. maybe based on previous performances. But not when there's a whole bunch of people. And that is a worry. And take it from me, Charles Akuna was given a target: win the Nations Cup and then qualify for the World Cup. Any coach, be it foreign, where people are now screaming and ranting and raving, be it foreign, will find it difficult to even achieve the first, let alone the second, with the current crop of players that we have. Another aspect we've got to look at it is...
I'm getting confused.
Okay.
That you are saying it comes down to how we organize and the capacity of the players.
Absolutely. The key...
Then you come to say the coach equally is responsible.
No, because if the coach gets up and makes a statement, when you've won, I saw the problem, so I did this and I did this. Then for crying out loud, carry the can. But in the case of Charles, and I'm not here to defend him, because he should face the same music, I never ever heard him at the news conference, even when we won, gloating and saying, I did this. I'll be fair to him. I never heard him, unlike some of the previous coaches. But for me, it is a case of players not up to the task, coaches not being up to the task, but more importantly, the one set of people we tend not to touch, which is a running theme.
Is the FA.
It's the FA.
Yeah.
Okay, it's the FA.
It's true.
And then we've also got to factor in government. You get up and you remove Charles Akuna. What happens now? He had a 2-year contract. Who's going to pay for it? The rest of it?
Government.
Can somebody not argue that? Is that not causing financial loss to the team? Because when you bring in a new coach...
But you make the assessment. The contract is not in perpetuity. It has a time limit, but that does not also mean a guarantee for you to exhaust the term of the contract.
Are you aware that when you sign a contract within the football family and football circles, if you abrogate it, that is, the FA abrogates it, or the club abrogates it, you pay him the rest of his whatnot.
Yes.
And if the coach abrogates it, he pays.
It's a good term for any good contract. I'll bring in Gary, but could you? So what are you saying? You just mentioned the association.
Yeah.
How are they culpable in this?
Oh, you know, in anything we do, you have to look at the management of any organization. Take the FA or the whole structure as an organization. And if it's not working, I mean, from where I sit in my day job, if something is not working, people are going to point out to me and say, look, the CEO has to take some flack for this as well. But somehow, as a country, the constant we always change is the coach. We never seem to ever change the FA when things are not going right.
Because the FA doesn't play ball.
No, but
the FA is the one that puts the policy in place.
But they manage and they put policy and implement. Look, when we qualified for 06, and I've had opportunity to say this, in Nyantechi's time, we had the most unified FA, or the most unified group of stakeholders I had ever seen, probably in my entire life. The FA, the ministry, you know, sponsors, the fans, journalists, we were all together. It doesn't look like we've managed to build that kind of unity.
How is that a factor of what we're seeing?
It is a serious factor because there are divisions, and there's backbiting, and there are accusations, there's finger pointing. When that is happening, everybody wants to say, I told you so.
Biting is no football leg.
Samson
doesn't kick a ball.
Yeah, it does.
Samson.
It does psychologically, Samson. It does.
Please, are you telling me that if there's no uniformity within your law firm, it would not suffer structural damage? Are you telling me that if there's no uniformity within an industrial complex, the Barclays banks, I'm sorry for mentioning names, data banks and whatnot? Listen, you know that more than I do as a lawyer. The crux of the matter is that there is no uniformity in the FA as we speak. You have various factions going around at various radio stations fighting. And I'm talking about the wider, not the five who are running the day-to-day whatnot. The whole football structure where the clubs are represented. They're fighting among themselves.
Gary, from what I have heard so far, where does CK come in this?
Well, I think that Kojo Adamensa said that, I don't remember the word he used. I think he said he basically tried to say that CK has become the scapegoat, or, you know, it's always the FA that is a constant, but the coaches always keep going when we know what the structural issues are. So CK comes in because he is unable to look at all these factors that have been eloquently put together by Mr. Tufo and Mr. Adai-Mensah and withstand them, which is why, and I would jump the gun and come back. I personally have said in the past 2 weeks that based on everything that has been said right now, I don't think there is a local coach in Ghana right now. Please note, I'm not saying that we don't have a coach on this soil now who can tactically lead us to the Africa Cup of Nations to a fantastic performance or even qualify us to the World Cup. I am saying there is no Ghanaian coach on this soil right now who, based on the factors that have been so eloquently put by Mr. Tufo and Mr. Adai-Mensah, has the shoulder, the broad shoulder to say no when required and to tell people to stand in their place, or as Dr. Nyaho Tamaklo said a couple of days ago on Joy FM, to take a pen and resign because he is being faced with interference. So that is where CK comes in. And that is why I asked, even though I knew that tactically he may not be such a bad coach, but because of all these factors that were not inuring, I mean, I'm talking about psychologically, the fact that even in the back room there is no uniformity. There is the fact that the people who hired CK Akono did not trust him even at the time he was given the job.
Explain. What do you mean by lack of uniformity at the back room and the employers don't trust the employee? What do you mean by that?
Mr. Tufo mentioned an interview Keto granted on Joy FM, where he mentioned in that interview that, you know, the time where Black Stars coaches will put forward their squad and nobody will talk about it is over. It was in April, on April 10. I did an interview. In preparing for that interview, I'll give you an idea into why I asked the questions I did. In my research and in my asking questions before preparing for that interview, I was told not once, not twice, not 3 times that CK Akono was not the first choice for the GFA. And I think that Mr. Kojo Adai-Mensah and Mr. Kaltufo will tell you this for free. They don't charge you any consultancy. So how are you going to work as CK Akono with a glad heart, without feeling pressure, without feeling that your people have your back, when the people who are superintending your work on a day-to-day basis don't even trust you? Which brings to bear a problem we have had from independence. Now, because we don't have time, I'm just keeping everything concise, but in 2 minutes, I'll explain something. Mr. Kojo Adai-Mensah mentioned that in 2006, it seemed that all the parts of the wheel, all the cogs of the wheel worked in harmony, and we had the best, is what I have seen, the best I have seen in my lifetime as well. So what does he mean? The sports minister was here, Osafo Mapo at the time, I believe.
Yes, it was.
You had the GFA president who had just come, Abafresh, Kwesi Nyantechi.
Yeah.
He knew that the entire system was against him because of the ageist society that we are in. Oh, he's a small boy. So he was doing everything possible to ensure that it works. So even when, you know, the usual bureaucracy and things came in, he made concessions just to ensure that we got what was right. Sponsorship was at the best time. We had companies like Goldfields and others who trusted in the vision and came together and made monies available. However, there is something that we probably are forgetting. We were in a kind of situation that we found ourselves in the post-ANAS era, where Keto Kraku's administration had a fantastic opportunity to do same. We had come from the old GFA chairman, so remember, Kwesi Nyantechi had become the first president of the GFA. So it was a new time, it was a new era. There were a lot of people who were willing to give him the benefit of the doubt, including all the other stakeholders. In the same vein, Keto Kraku had a lot of goodwill even 1 year ago. But other things that, you know, will waste our time if we talked about came into play, and it has eroded that goodwill. In 2006, all these factions sang with one tune. Crucially, the fan base of the Black Stars, the people of Ghana, also bought into that new, Kwesi Nyantakyi has come fresh. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. And so they gave him room to operate. Let's come down to Keto Kraku's administration. He and his administration were given a lot of room to operate. It was with deep regret that I have to say right now, and I was thinking about it this week, that the Keto Kraku administration have lost a fantastic opportunity. They've lost so much goodwill through factors that are mostly caused by themselves, but also exigent factors. So that is where, yes.
Interesting. Now, Gary says something, Kojo. How do you, the employer, employ someone who is not your first choice? I don't understand that. Tell me, you guys in the sports industry, what exactly is going on?
This is because...
And are you saying the campaign is a lost cause because a new coach will not bring any difference?
No, it's not a lost cause. But let me tell you, let me answer the first part, as in why you employ somebody who is not your first choice. This is because the FA is not the one who pays the coach. That is the bottom line. The FA do not pay the coach. So there's another entity somewhere that actually pays the coach.
Which entity is the state?
It's the state. So whether you like it or not, you need state consent for whoever you employ and the amount. Because the state will have a budget beyond which they will not be willing to go to pay the coach.
Is it a question of the budget, or is a question of I have a first choice, but the state has an interest in the second choice?
No, the state did not have, as far as we know, the state wanted a Ghanaian coach. The president, in his run-up to being elected, had a mantra of, I believe in Ghana. It would have been counterintuitive, or it would have been contrary to that mantra for him to support the hiring of a foreign coach. So he insisted, when the FA said Kwesi Appiah, they wouldn't be able to work with Kwesi Appiah, he said, oh, well and good. I would prefer you kept Kwesi Appiah because he's Ghanaian, he's done it before, we know what he's about, but not a foreign coach. He made it clear. The FA's first choice would have been to hire a foreign coach. We all know that. They'll say what's the evidence, but it is true. So they had to get the next best thing. That is how come we got the next best thing. That is to answer the question. But it's not a lost cause. I mean, we have what, 6 more games to go. We've played 2. Yeah. 6 to go. So it can't be a lost cause.
What role would a new coach play?
4 to go.
What role will a new coach play to change anything now that you are back to doing the mathematics and hoping and praying that somebody loses and so?
We have to win all our games. It's a very simple, there's no formula to this. We have to win all our games and not depend on any.
And what magic will any coach do? And we hear Milovan is likely to get it, right?
Let's get a few things here.
Okay.
Already, in response to what Kojo said, that who would take a, second choice if this is your first choice? Well, it's going to happen again now.
Yeah.
Again?
Yeah, it's going to happen again now. Okay.
Why? So we are not learning anything?
Because the first choice was René Hava, the guy who was the assistant coach to Claude Leroy when he was in charge of the Black Stars between 2006 and 2008. And when Leroy left, he followed him. The guy who took Zambia to the trophy, the guy who took the Ivory Coast to the trophy. The man is now in Saudi. He has made it known that he's not going to abrogate his Saudi contract because they are almost on the verge of qualifying for the World Cup. So already that answers your question, your first choice. Then there's also the other theory of the fact that you don't always get your first choice.
So your first choice is not available in this case. That's what you mean.
Then even if your first choice is available, then the question comes to your budget. You, Samson Ladi Ayenini, the human rights lawyer, the lawyer that stands up and we all watch and love you, would throw a tantrum if this GFA and the government were there to, let's say, acquiesce to René Havard's contract. I'm driving at something. Somebody's asking for 100,000. How the heck will you support $100,000 a month in this country? A country that is supposed to be, you would lead a campaign against it. So you will go for your second choice. If your second choice doesn't fit in within your budget, then you go for the first choice. Because a budget has already been read for 2021. The review has already been set for 2021. Are you now going to take somebody who is going to take you even 45,000 a month? Where will that money come from? Where is the government going to get that money from? Granted that if the government agrees to such a thing. Then there's the mantra of the local coach, made in Ghana. So you've got all manner of these things in there. And then the likes of Carl Tufo within the media, who is adamant that as for the Black Star coaching job, it should be a Ghanaian and nobody else. Because I look at other countries and I see it in Brazil, England. And I see it in Argentina, and I see it in Germany, and I see it in Italy. With all due respect. So if we say the Ghanaian is not good, Samson, the last statement.
You have been told that this is being emotional, and there's nothing emotional about this. The local coaches are not helping.
The local coaches are not helping. With all due respect, Samson, since 1957 we got independence. Where have we got as a country? So therefore our politicians are not helping. So the logic is what? Go bring back the Brits, right? Is that what you're telling me? Thank you.
I agree with that. I mean, we have made certain rules the preserve of Ghanaians in this country. Parliamentarians, you have to be Ghanaian. If you are even a dual citizen, you have to go and, dual citizen, even. Where you have both allegiance, you have to go. The presidency, no matter how competent or incompetent a president is, when we kick one president out, Ghanaian, who do we replace with? Ghanaian. Why is the
so you also belong to this?
I belong to that camp, totally. But the local coaches, today I want to use...
In the course of the week, who is it that said you guys are being emotional?
No, there's no emotional.
And that it is not about a black...
No, Samson, no.
Being emotional is all right.
No, listen. I agree, the local coaches too don't help themselves. While they are playing, if they are interested in the job, in being a coach, do your coaching badges. Some of them will wait, blow the money, spend it on cars and cars.
When you hire them, you don't pay them.
What?
No, but if I'm hiring a UEFA B against a UEFA Pro, who earns more? The UEFA Pro.
No, even the little, you don't pay them until they are going, and you have mounting salaries.
Something got a point when you get to the fact that for 6 months, I hear he's been paid for the first 2 months.
Yeah. Even Duncan is owed more.
So for 6 months,
Duncan is owed more.
As the fancy one say, won't you call?
Yeah.
Duncan, and that's what I'm trying to tell you. It falls within the budget. Because even the meager 25,000 a month, you haven't paid for 6 months, 150,000. You think it's easy? But you see, if you have this policy that you are going to get up and bring your coaches up to speed,
yes,
Ghanaian coaches up to speed,
yes,
and let them keep on whatnot.
Yes.
We abandoned it.
One day we'll get it right.
We abandoned it during CK Jamfi's time. CK Jamfi started this whole, Kwame Nkrumah started this whole business, got rid of all those foreign guys and brought in CK. He persevered with them. Guess what? After all the poor 1960, 61, 62, he got it right in 63. 4 years in the job. Right?
We'll get you.
Gary,
Carl, I agree.
Can I come in now?
Has the deed been executed, and how much of our success is dependent on the new coach?
I have loved the trajectory of the discussion so far because, it segues nicely into the future. Now, we did persevere with CK Jamfi. He failed. We gave him the opportunity. However, as historically astute as the two gentlemen in the studio are, they will tell you that even while he was failing, his capacity was being built. Kwame Nkrumah, I was privileged to speak to and interview CK Jamfi before he passed. Kwame Nkrumah took him literally to the ends of the earth, Samson, to the ends of the earth here in Ohinijan, to train him to become among the best in the world. I need to emphasize that. Now, let's speed quickly to this era, okay? When Kurt Okraku was campaigning as GFA president, and Samson, this is instructive because it tells you the mindset of our current administration, indeed, of those who will be honest in the football fraternity. Guess what Kurt Okraku said? He said, if elected as president, the winner of the Ghana Premier League, the coach of the winning team of the Ghana Premier League, if he is Ghanaian, the coach of the winning team of the Ghana Women's Premier League and of the Division 1 will be taken for attachments outside the country. Let me repeat. He said the winner of the Ghana Premier League, so as it is right now, the winning coach is Samuel Boadu. If the FA are able to execute, the winning coach of Division 1 and the winning coach of the Women's Premier League, that's Hazakes Ladies, Yusuf Basigi, the FA, per Ketokraku's promise, are supposed to take them on attachment. Now, why would an FA president campaign on such an election material or an election promise? It is a tacit admission from our FA president, even before he became president, that the Ghanaian coach right now, even the best Ghanaian coach right now, is not up to speed when it comes to the African terrain. Now, if we really want the job to be the preserve of Ghanaians, let us respect the Ghanaian professional by giving them the pro license, which is the highest right now. Yeah. Please, let's not talk, I mean the UEFA, the CAF pro license version is absolute. Mr. Kaltufa, please give me the fancy. I like
rubbish. Rubbish.
The CAF versions that our coaches are getting day in, day out are a no-no. Let me give you an example. Richard Kinson does not have his coaching badges, but at the CAF level, because he's an ex-professional, they have something called the fast track for him to go onto the UEFA A on the CAF license D. In UEFA, you wouldn't dare. You would not dare. Look, even in UEFA, when you are going for the pro license or the license A, Samson, no matter who you are, when you go for the course and you miss even one day of the course, you know what happens, Samson? You will start the course all over again.
Yes, that's true.
And pay.
That's true.
Interesting.
That is UEFA.
Interesting. So
the people are not kidding. So look, let me just finish by saying I am all for the Ghanaian. Look, as a Ghanaian growing in my profession and looking to make inroads on the international scene, I totally agree that Ghanaians must be given the opportunity. But I am not going to say Ghanaians should be given the opportunity when I know that when they are given the opportunity, the entire system connives not to help them give us the best.
But it is not going to be a Ghanaian, and you started with your first statement that there is none who compares with CK. Did I get it right?
He said there's none who can stand up to the establishment.
Who can stand up to the influences, which unfortunately will not end anytime soon because of the factors listed, especially by Mr.
But Gary, I don't agree with you.
Are there prospects for a local coach now?
Yes.
Oh yes, on that I agree. I mean, you know, it can be a bit. I think that there's a gentleman called Prosper Nate Ogum who is going to be named imminently as coach of Asante Kotoko pretty shortly. There is Samuel Boadu, who has shown in his past two jobs, including the current one, that, look, given even 1 year of an intensive UEFA pro license course, I see Samuel Boadu hitting the stratosphere.
You're talking about people who must be prepared. Yes, Carl, how, as we end, whoever we pick, what do we need to do to change the narrative?
Well, first thing, stop, and it's looking more like a foreigner, yeah? Stop trying to tell him who to pick. And if it's the foreigner, which is what Gary alluded to, he's not going to take any rubbish from you. That's why even Mariano Barreto, who was a disaster for Kotoko this year, when he was coaching, he would lock his door so that Iti Mensah cannot come in. So clear.
Really?
Absolutely. Back in 2000, yes. So that he would not dare walk into the dressing room. I'm coming to speak to jab the voice. 2, the FA have got to make it their priority that whatever it takes to get us to the World Cup and to win the Nations Cup, they'll move the lens. And third and last, but certainly not the least, is the government itself has got to look again and say, are we investing in the future by then deciding that, look, okay, we are not going to take any $25,000 coach. With all due respect, maybe we'll go after 50,000.
So I suppose you agree with this, but since it's not limited to the coach, but the players, that you agree that this is Kobo, which is not helpful, what should be done?
Okay, we need to write out a plan, not have a plan in our head. We need to write out a plan, document it, and follow it regimentally. Look, let me be controversial. There is nothing wrong if Ghana doesn't qualify for Qatar 2022.
I agree.
There is nothing wrong, and we focus even on winning the AFCON rather. Italy didn't qualify for the World Cup in 2018. The country almost got burnt down. But what happened? They sat back, planned with Mancini, and what happened? They won Euro with a blend of youth and experience. They had a plan written down and regimentally executed. That's the way forward, Samson.
That's the way forward. And Gary, you had already started the way forward. What would you say finally on it? Apart from you saying we should train them, invest in them, and even in their failure, they are gaining experience. But we can't wait. We are impatient.
Samson, I would say that once again, I'd like to see clouds, in silver linings, silver lining in clouds. We have a great opportunity right now. We have the winner of the Ghana Premier League. If we even want, we can take the top 2 or 3 first, second, third coaches of the Ghana Premier League. Take the guy who won Division 1, the Women's Premier League. Find sponsors for them. Take them to do their UEFA badges and tell ourselves that whoever is going to be the Black Stars coach now, he should do his job. By the time whoever it is done, we are all agreeing that the next person should be Ghanaian. And we should keep on like that and like that. That is all I'll say.
All right. Dr. Charles Rekubrobe says that all of Ghana's AFCON success were achieved with local coaches.
Correct.
New colonialists at play.
I won't go too far there. The crux of the matter is that it's true. All of our successes have been with Ghanaian coaches. However, it's also true that some of our worst and nightmarish experiences have been with Ghanaian coaches.
So we take the path that you guys suggest, the holistic approach, a plan. You have to write it out. Even the Bible says so.
Yes.
I know.
Right.
The problem we have in this country is going the full haul. You start something, it seems to be moving in the right direction, and then you just sit on the left.
Right.
That's a major, major problem.
And maybe we have the money to. You were talking about 100,000, and we will be angry. Those who give you money say, every year you can't account for as much as $3 billion that is brought to your country.
But are you aware? Are you also aware that if a country goes quotation marks, cap in hands, and begging IMFs and the World Banks, they ask you them, why are you paying 100,000 to?
All right, thank you guys so very much, and we should have started with this topic, the things I'm seeing here.
Samson, I think that you've done. Sometimes it's short and sweet.
Right.
We've all made a point.
Right.
Yeah, we've all made a point.
Right.
If we had gone further, it would just be laid up the points.
Okay, so just get ready and enjoy the Joy Sports as they begin to bring you even more on the issues that have come up as far as our Black Stars situation is concerned. Thank you very much, Carl Tufor, lecturer and sports journalist. Gary Al Smith is with Joy Sports, and Kojo Ademensa, former columnist, Kotoko Express, and sports analyst. The first time I'm meeting him face to face in the studio. Always just hearing the name and hearing the voice. Thank you so much. My outfit is always provided for by Habil's Couture. Today is provided for by a regent in Gorogo, Tongo, in the Talinsi. district of the Bolga, of the Upper East region. So go to Habel's Cotter, particularly for the best in kaftans. I return to see good ones sitting there. I'll wear them from next week. You see them. You can contact them 0200 841 988 0200 841 988. They are at East Legon at Jiringano Gate. Thank you all so very much. I'm Samson Ladi Anyanini. Join us again next week for another interesting edition of the show. Tomorrow afternoon, 2 p.m., join me in my legal clinic as we talk about a new law coming up for interstate succession. It looks like the side chicks are going to get some benefits. Have a good afternoon.